Good morning. So this is the third in our Ask HR series. I'm pleased to be here with Pam Watkins, who is our HR specialist. And we love the chance to run a few things by Pam that help us manage our people better. And in some cases, even if you're working with other people, there are a lot of things that impact how smoothly our days go and how successful we are in the workplace. So Pam is helping us navigate some of those. So we've got some questions today that this first one I'm a little curious about because I don't know a lot about this terminology. But Pam, what is wage compression and why is it something as an employer I should have some understanding of?
So wage compression, the official term for it is pay compression, but I'm hearing a lot of questions about wage compression right now. And what happens is it's when you're bringing new hires in at ranges, salaries very close to what your experienced people are making. And right now, we all know what the market is doing. There's everybody needs people, right? And we're seeing people offer higher starting salaries to get them to stay competitive. So I'm going to give you an example. Say I'm hiring a general labor position, and my normal rate to get somebody in to do that is $12 an hour. Okay. So maybe I have some people in that capacity already making $15 an hour. But now, because I'm having trouble getting people, I have to bump that up and I have to pay them $14 an hour. So now we've got our tenured employees saying, wait a minute, they're coming in at almost what I'm making, and I've been with you for 8 years. It's creating a lot of dissension in the workplace. Now, the reason that this is such a sticky wicket is because we know that the National Labor Relations Act says that you cannot prohibit employees from discussing their salaries or work conditions, right? Because that's actually a violation of employee worker rights.
Can I ask you, Pam, sorry to interrupt you. When did that change? Because you and I have been around long enough to know
yeah,
you can
we were
lose
told,
you could lose your job if you
That's
talk
right.
to your
Right. And so back in the day, what Susan's referring to, back in the day, I remember being in banking, and I started my career as an administrative assistant in the quote personnel department, right? And we were told under no uncertain terms, you cannot discuss your salary with anybody. And we didn't. Like, it was something that was told to us and we didn't. But the National Labor Relations has always been there. People just skirted around it.
I see.
Now, what some employers do, and if you do this, you are on the very cusp, you're one lawsuit away from violating this. A lot of employers will say, hey, new hire, we know that sometimes employees talk about wages. And while we can't prohibit you from talking about wages, just be aware that sometimes it could cause hurt feelings. Okay. So you're skating on that really thin line. I wouldn't do that. So what people are saying though is, what do we do? Because we can't afford to raise everybody's rates, but yet we have to hire in at a higher rate to get people. So a couple of things. The main causes, four main causes for wage compression or pay compression are minimum wage increase. The market rate for starting salaries is increasing, which is what we saw happen with COVID and even before COVID. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot is inconsistent pay practices over time, and put a pin in that for just a minute, and increased employee awareness. Employees now know they can go out and they can Google on, ONET or BLS or whatever, hey, what's a salary pay for a general laborer in this market? So those four things are what is driving this. Now, the inconsistent pay practices over time. When I go out to an employer and I conduct an HR audit, I talk to them about pay practices. Help me understand how you give people increases. Is it done annually? Do you offer a COLA, cost of living adjustment once a year or every 3 years? Is there any type of incentive pay? how do you ensure that those workers that are maybe at the top of your range, which is called red circled, how do you ensure that you're still able to give them some options for increasing their pay? So a couple of things, I do not have a magic wand. The entire country is dealing with this. It's been the discussion at probably every client that I've seen in the last 3 months. But here's a couple of things. Look at the market. If you haven't looked at the market in a while, now is the time. You need to look at the market and see what's going on and what competitive pay is showing. Then you need to look at your, what I call internal equity. Two things of wages that I talk about a lot are internal equity and external equity. External is what the market's paying. What are your competitors paying? Internal is, where are you as a company? Do you have big variances between people? And if so, can you explain that so that if you're ever challenged, why do you have pay inequities? So a recent example, I went to an organization and they asked me to come in and do an audit. And when we got to this topic, they said, well, Pam, over years, this guy has performed really well. And so we always give him extra. And this guy is average. And so he doesn't get as much. But over a period of 10 years, those differences between 8% increases and 2% increases become very, it just compounds your problem.
Yeah.
And so then that means you have to adjust your salary ranges. Not everybody has salary ranges. But if you do, one way to do this is to break your positions into what I'm going to call, and I'm going to use the general labor example, general labor 1, and maybe your range is $10 to $14 an hour. General labor 2 is for your more tenured senior people, and it's $12 to $16 per hour, just as an example. But you need to look at the market. You should run a census, find out where everybody's at. If you have people that are below what I'm going to call what COVID set as the base of $15 an hour, you should be looking to see over the next couple of years, how are you going to get them there? Is it going to be every 6 months? Are you going to offer a base pay plus what I recommend is variable pay? And what that looks like is somebody has a base pay, but then you set some goals, performance initiatives or whatever, and you compensate them for meeting those goals. That can be a variable pay. In industries where they're experiencing heavy attendance issues, I suggest maybe putting in an attendance bonus program. And what that can look like is anything. I worked with one company who all employees, if they worked a quarter with no unexcused absences, meaning they didn't schedule vacation or they didn't take any time off that wasn't scheduled, okay, or pre-approved. Then what they do is count up all those hours, and the next quarter they add an extra 25 cents to their pay rate. Or you give them a check, you cut them a bonus check for that attendance. So there's a gazillion ways to do it based on the needs and what's happening in your organization.
So you did say the word I was waiting to hear in there is one way to deal with that, to use bonuses to reward that exemplary behavior.
You can, but they've got to be, you should tie them to something, because if you do
absolutely, but if you've got a star employee that's accomplishing things, but you don't want to get into the situation where by giving raises, which are cumulative also, that's why the divide gets bigger. Because I know some organizations, just as a matter of policy, never do bonuses.
Right.
And it might be, this might be the time
to consider
during this, while we're having challenges around pay compression, to actually introduce some kind of a bonus system.
Right. So you've got to have a plan. So that starts, 3 things: run a census, see where your people are at. What does your internal wage structure actually look like? Make sure that you don't have any wide gaps between a female and a male doing the same job, right? And then take a look and see what you can do. Get creative. If you're going to maintain, because if you don't do something and the gap continues to get, less and less and less, it's going to lead to turnover. It's going to lead to morale issues. Just remember, you can't prohibit employees from discussing their wages. And when new hires come in, those more senior people that suspect that they're coming in higher than what they did, they're going to ask them. They're going to say, "Hey, what'd they start you at?"
And they can.
And they can. And that's a seemingly innocent question. And the person's going to say, well, $15 an hour. And then that person's going to say, I'm making 16 and I've been here for 7 years. And then how do you think that makes that employee feel? Devalued, underappreciated, all those things.
Well, can I tag on that? Maybe I think you would support me in this, that probably the other thing, if you're not doing already, you should be doing regular sit downs with your employees to discuss what their compensation levels are and benefits, because benefits can play in, and to the extent that you can, be open about how you prepare your budget and how that all fits in. And
right.
Obviously harder to do if you've got 300 employees than if you've got 10 employees, but keeping transparency about how your business operates and is successful and how your employees play in.
Exactly. The last thing that I can throw out is a pay process called skill-based pay. Now, not some companies do this. I will tell you, if you have a trained HR person on your staff, they'll be familiar with this terminology. But basically, what it is, and it comes with its own headaches. Okay. But say I'm hired as we're going to use that general labor, hired as a general labor. These are my core duties. But then the next level, I would know as an employee, to go to the next level of compensation, I need to cross-train and learn these duties, because then, and maybe that's a maintenance position, okay? Because the maintenance pays higher because it requires more education, knowledge, and skills. So what happens then is that employee needs to be given an opportunity to cross-train to learn those skills. But the advantage to the employer is, if the maintenance person calls off sick, now you have somebody that is at least partially trained in some of those duties. So that can be a win-win. I will tell you that skill-based pay programs, you have to have a champion, and they've got to be unbiased. And what I mean by that is, there's got to be some checklist or some process that you go through to validate that the person learn those skills. And that's got to be very objective and not subjective. Not, oh, I think I like this guy and he's really shown an effort. So yeah, he knows how to do that. So it's one of those, it can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
But it's an option. Okay.
That makes sense. Well, as soon as you started to describe it, I'm very familiar with it, and great to know that there are some strategies. Kind of one last question as a tag along there, and I don't know if this, two-part question. One, I don't know if it's more common to have pay compression when you're talking about hourly workers or salaried workers, or if it goes across all.
It goes across all.
Okay. And then do you have any idea of when the, some people on the call may be familiar with and others may not, but when the exempt threshold will go up again?
I would have to look.
Okay.
It's been a moving target, so I would have to look.
Okay.
But that'll be well broadcast. Yeah. And when I see that, notice, Susan, I can send it and you can share it.
Okay.
To the members. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So now we're going to really shift to a very, very different topic, one equally, if not more important, but one that's on all of our minds. With violence in workplaces recently, sometimes it's internal and sometimes it's coming completely unexpected externally. What should we as employers be prepared for? What should we be doing? What is our responsibility? And maybe you can guide us from all your wisdom. What's kind of overshooting it, and no, obviously no pun intended there, but what can we do to keep our people safe without locking us all up? So
right. So this is a topic that it's heart-wrenching. So far this year in 2022, there have been 240 mass shootings at my last check. Okay. So businesses have a responsibility to provide employees with a safe workplace. So that means businesses need to be prepared. So remember that OSHA has a general duty clause, okay? And it says that every employer has to provide a workplace that is, quote, free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. So nobody expects our schools to be at risk. Okay. When I was growing up, I mean, goodness, just times have changed so rapidly. So employers have that responsibility under OSHA's general duty clause. So you have to think about it. I suggested to the HR group members just a couple weeks ago after the shooting in Texas, I said, if you haven't already had this tough discussion with your executive team, you need to. It's not enough to have a violence-free workplace policy. It's simply not enough. You're not doing enough by just having a policy. So I think about what the biggest risk is. So an organization's workforce is both the biggest asset and biggest risk for workplace violence. Okay. So hire right. And I've talked to employers that have recently said to me, you know what, Pam, we've lowered our standard of hiring because we can't get anybody. Okay. So if you have people that you haven't done a thorough check on, you're putting yourselves at risk. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you hire somebody that has been arrested for bringing a gun into somewhere and threatening someone, or whatever, causing physical harm, or there's all sorts of little red flags that you should be looking for. But you have to make sure that when you're doing that and checking those backgrounds, that you don't discriminate. Because remember, we talked in an earlier series that it's important that if somebody tells you they have a criminal history, that you say, okay, how long, you got to match it to the job. Will it in any way impact their ability to do the job? Do they have the skills, knowledge, and education to do the job? Okay. And you look at how long ago was the offense? What was the offense? And those types of things. So just remember that they can't automatically be excluded from hiring. So in one breath, I'm telling you to look at the background, but then in the other breath, you've got to make sure that you're doing it right. You should be, if you're not monitoring for substance abuse, statistics show that substance abuse can alter people's mental state, make them more inclined to do something impulsive, not think about what they're doing with a clear mind. And then, of course, comes down to the policy. Policy has to be very strongly written. You have to spell out what constitutes behavior that's prohibited. Is it causing physical injury? Is it making threatening remarks? Is it displaying aggression, touching someone, pushing someone, possessing a weapon? Now, gets really interesting, the whole weapon thing. So you're talking to somebody that has a concealed permit. You're talking to somebody that was raised with guns in the home, right? And but when we say no weapons on company property, does that include your parking lot? Because there's those employees that might have a deer rifle and they're hunting on their way to work or on their way home from work. You've got to be specific. What does that mean? There's got to be a reporting procedure. So if an employee feels like somebody could be prone to some type of violence, they've got to have a safe place to report that to. And then there has to be an investigation, of course, if that gets reported. So in addition to having your policy, you have to train employees. Okay. And all of this needs to be documented along the way. And then if there's an emergency situation, you need to have a plan. How are you dealing with it? If you're in retail, is the response Somebody calls 911, somebody locks the door, well, then you're locking yourself in with that person. So you've got to think about what your response is going to be. The other thing, and I don't want to speak for the local police departments, but sometimes it's helpful if they have a floor plan of your layout, so that if they ever get an emergency call at your workplace, they kind of know the entrances and exits and where people might be. So that's something that I've always did when I worked in manufacturing, because of the size of the facilities. It's it's not a small space, and people could be anywhere. So, and the last piece is enforcement. If you feel you have somebody that's violating that policy, you've got to address it. And rather that includes putting them on administrative leave while you conduct an investigation, rather that if you have a strong policy, you'll also have a statement in your policy that, or somewhere in your handbook, that includes the right to search. Okay, right to search a desk, right to search a locker, right to search even a vehicle if it's parked on company property. So again, it kind of comes back to that planning. So if you've not thought about it, you should, and get a plan.
Maybe one of the things we can follow up with, Pam, is offering our members what kind of resources are there for training.
Yes.
And tools, whether it's, cameras, alarms,
Yes.
the paperwork side of things, but maybe we can explore a little bit.
Yes.
What are some great, easy resources for our members?
Well, and there's a gentleman, and I'm having one of my moments. I've forgotten his name now, but I met him. And when he came in to meet with me, he passed our security at this company, right? Which was signing in, verifying he's a citizen, giving him his ID badge and all of those things. And we get into the conference room, and I will get you his name because he's a great resource, a wonderful resource. Get into the conference room, and he said, "Did I pass your security check?" We're like, "Yeah, you're here, you had an appointment to see me, whatever." And then he pulls out of his pocket a gun. Now, this was I don't know what kind of gun it was, but it was a gun that could have shot someone. And then out of the other side of his waistband, he pulls out another thing. And pretty soon he's got all this stuff stacked up on the table. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, yeah. It's one of those aha moments, right? And he is actually a consultant, and he goes out and helps employers prepare for this kind of thing. Great resource. So
great. Well, we'll follow up.
Yeah, I will definitely get you that.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, an important topic, and one that I unfortunately think we're going to be talking about for a while. I hope that we'll see a future where we once again feel that the schools are the safest place that our kids could be, and the workplace is a place where we really feel safe as well. But I think it is our responsibility. You've been clear to make sure that that's the case, that we're using the right tools. So I do want to remind listeners, we've got a few minutes left. If there's something that you'd like to ask Pam, please put it in the chat, and Tessa will see that we bring that question up. But here's another one that we hope we're smart enough nowadays to see less and less of, but I'm not sure that we're there. Allegations of sexual harassment. We women have come a long way, and I don't want to assume that it only goes one direction. We could definitely have that going from women to men. But what do you suggest as our strategies for dealing with an allegation of sexual harassment, and maybe even the question about whether, what the interpretation of what happened was?
Okay. Well, sexual harassment is a hot topic. Still, many states have adopted legislation that requires employers to do training. Connecticut, New York, California, and in the context of what they've adopted as law, they've given employers an actual list of what must be covered. Okay. So most people have a sexual harassment policy. But again, I'm going to tell you that to have a policy and not have training is not enough. Okay. So a lot of people say, oh, you're a new hire. We have a sexual harassment policy. It's in the book. Here, sign off on it. That's not enough. Okay. So you have to think about what the state requirements are, and then have a very strong policy. And in that policy, you've also got to contain the process, like rules of engagement, how to report it, and plan in advance. So if it's my supervisor that's doing the harassing, I'm not going to report it to him or her. I need to have a plan. Does it go directly to human resource? What if human resource is the harasser? So there's got to be like a contingency. But the written policy needs to be very specific and not just prevent sexual harassment, but all forms of harassment. It needs to define what sexual harassment is. And then in addition to the complaint, regular training. And I actually suggest annual training on this topic. Keeping careful records of the training is important. If you're ever engaged in a claim, you need the names of the employees that were trained, the date, the training sign-in sheets, what type of training, like what did you cover? Like literally keep a copy of the PowerPoint or whatever tools you used, and the name of the training provider, like if you outsource your training to someone else, because that is actually asked for in an investigation. So when you're doing an investigation, if somebody complains of sexual harassment, and this has happened multiple times in my career, an employee will come in and make a complaint. Okay. And they're genuinely upset at that point. And then they say, oh, but I don't want you to investigate this. I don't want you to talk to the harasser. Okay. Well, once it's reported, you are required to investigate. You can't sweep that. You can't close that Pandora's box. It's open. You've got to take action. So you start the investigation. You promise confidentiality. And I'm shortening this for purposes of this session.
Yeah.
But you promise confidentiality, quote, to the degree possible, end quote, because you can't investigate thoroughly if you can't talk to other people that might have witnessed it or been party to it, or actually told that person to report it, right? If they have knowledge, they're part of it. You have to conduct the interview. And again, guys, you know how to conduct an interview. It's who, what, when, where, and why, if you know why they did it. You ask all the questions, you dig deep, you take extremely careful notes. Have them fill out a complaint form, the person that's bringing the complaint to you. If there's witnesses, they fill out a witness statement. And then once you start the complaint investigation, if you feel that there's enough warranted, you need to put the harasser out on administrative leave, but not be punitive. Okay, so if you have to do that, you may want to pay them until you conclude the investigation. But here's a piece that many people don't realize. Okay, so if I'm complaining about sexual harassment and I come to Susan and I say, I'm being harassed, okay, and she starts the investigation, one of the things that she needs to ask me is, how would you like this matter to be resolved? Don't make any promises. But for example, if it's somebody that's on the same shift as me or working the same department as me, then, and I say, I'd be more comfortable if I didn't see them, if I didn't work side by side with them, if I didn't have the same breaks as them. There's where the employer knows, here's part of how we solve this problem. Okay. And it might be moving someone's shift. It might be termination if it's, blatant and, or it might be bringing them in, doing retraining, setting those boundaries again, putting them on a probationary period, or what I'm going to call a last chance agreement is what really would be called for in that case. So make sure that you're asking the person who's been harassed, what would you like to see? And then at the end, you need to follow back up with them. Now, you don't need to say, so-and-so was terminated, because they're going to find that out through the grapevine, but you need to say, we've dealt with this. Are you satisfied? This will no longer be an issue. This person won't be at the work site. Or this person, we're moving them to second shift, so you won't interact with them. Are you comfortable with that? And again, document.
Yeah. Great guidance. I mean, you are saying what I've heard for years, having those processes of training and documentation. Again, I think we are hearing more and more that people have uncomfortable work situations and need to know how to deal with them. So thank you.
One last thing I'm going to add to that.
Yep.
I hear people call me all the time and say, I have a hostile work environment, or I think I have a hostile work environment. Okay, so remember that in these cases, there's different types of sexual harassment. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that an employer is always liable for hostile work environment claims if it was created by the supervisor and there's discrimination as a tangible result of that. So meaning if a supervisor harassed me and they demoted me, or they did something to harm me in some way, that is grounds for a hostile work environment case under sexual harassment. For an employer to make a defense against that, they have to have and enforce a policy, training, they've got to have all their ducks in a row. So there is a hostile work environment claim that's connected to sexual harassment as well.
So a lot of responsibility there.
Yeah.
We are at 8:33, but if you're willing, we've got one more question, actually kind of two more questions, but one that might take you a few minutes to answer. But I'm going to start with the second one. We have the question, will we be doing more HR series? And my answer to that is, we're willing if Pam's willing and you want more information. So the future of this series we'll be discussing, and feedback from you would be wonderful.
Yes.
From you that are joining us today. We might discuss whether or not we continue through the summer. We're all trying to figure out, do we want to sit at our computers as much or step away through the warm months, or are these nice early sessions good? So please provide us with feedback on how you enjoyed today's session, and if you want more and are willing to submit questions, and we'll consider that. But let's wrap up today with a question that was submitted, and that is, how often do you see employers leveraging Section 125 and SIMRP to provide fully paid benefits for employees with no extra cost to the employers? You may even need to give a little slight explanation of that. And
so I'm not seeing a lot of this, at least with my current clients. So the Section 125 is what allows us to have our insurances like health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, deducted at a pre-tax for the employee's benefit.
Okay.
And I'm not read that again, at no additional
How
cost.
often do you see employers leveraging Section 125 and SIMRP to provide fully paid benefits to the employees for no additional cost to the employers? So I would think, I guess my question would be, my add-on question is this: are these provided through the employer, organized through the employer, but paid for by the employee? Or it looks like we might have an explanation, or can the employee find these benefits and have them deducted pre-tax? So they use the payroll tax deductions and other tax credits to pay for the benefits. So it must be, Reese, you are sharing that with you. Is this relatively new? And is it one of those things that we're going to be able to navigate as a benefit to both the employers and employees?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the SIMRP is a self-insured medical reimbursement plan.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So there's guidance in that under the CFR. and it tells you what amounts can be reimbursed. So I'm not sure, I haven't seen anybody make changes. So people that are currently doing self-insurance are, I mean, that's just what they do. They provide it. They have, there's different ways that people are doing that. I'm aware of one or two companies that are actually self-insured.
Mhm.
And what they do is the employees still pay a portion towards that insurance, but then the company pays up to a certain amount, and then the insurance covers beyond that amount. So I'm not real sure. I'm not seeing, uh, I guess, any changes real
Reese, is there,
recently.
Reese,
I
is there,
don't,
do you
yeah,
have anything to add?
I don't really have a whole lot of detail on this. I just came across it here within the last couple of weeks. There's actually, it was a company who was wanting us to use them as the administration of these types of
Oh,
situations. But basically, on average, but for the traditional small business to realistic like 50 employee up to 50 employees or so,
yeah.
um, can usually see around a $500 a month tax favorability per employee by incorporating both of those, by leveraging both of those. I'm going to call it plans, but you know how like the one is the tax code, the other one is the actual like type of plan. But by doing that, and then after their costs, etc., for administration, it usually leaves around $150 a month per employee left over. That's where they're like, you have to have ancillary benefits for this to work because that's a section 125. So
Right.
use your 150 a month to give
The employees
ancillary
no
benefits to
cost.
employees for no cost. Then
Yeah.
it's just a wash because it was just your tax deductions and everything.
Right.
So
I've
yeah,
not seen anybody do that yet, Reese. I would be interested to learn more about it. And I would ask a lot of questions. Anytime we're doing self-insured medical, you have to have a certain amount of employees for that to make sense to work for you. And if you're a small group, we know that the premiums can be based on your workforce, on the average age of your workforce, and if somebody has had some significant claims, if they start, so I've not heard about doing this. I am aware of how self-funded plans work. I've managed a couple of them, but I've not heard about this.
Yeah, I appreciate Reese asking that question, and it follows a conversation I had yesterday with someone saying that I've spent some time in the last couple of years exploring interesting benefits from healthcare to retirement plans, and particularly for small but very small businesses and organizations who benefits are costly for. We're going to be looking for creative ways for retention and attraction. So when there's something we don't understand, it's a great opportunity to dig in and see if there might be something that is mutually beneficial to the employer and employee.
Right.
So I suspect that somewhere in this there may be, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah. Thank you, Reese, for submitting that question.
Sorry, I
Well,
couldn't be more helpful on that one.
yeah. Well, with that, Pam, do you have any other thoughts or anything you want to add before we wrap up here?
I think I'm good. I'm good. Enjoy your day, everybody, as gloomy
Yeah.
as it may be.
And am I right that if we talk about this some more, we may be able to add some additional sessions,
Sure.
whether we do it in individual sessions or another series? We did this as a series of 3. So I want to thank Pam for giving us her time. And often some of it was preparation before the session, and others is just years of wisdom from working in this field. And thank you, Tessa, for, as always, facilitating this setup and inviting everyone and getting everyone here successfully, still working our technology. So wonderful. Well, have a great day, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you all in person soon. So
Okay.
thank
Thanks.
you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day.